All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Ken Lowen, Director of Client Solutions at Advisicon. For those of you who haven't already worked with Advisicon, I'd like to tell you a little bit about us. Our mission is very straightforward. We want to boost your project management efficiencies by optimizing your processes and technologies, creating measurable results that empower you and your organization. We have over 20 years in the project management industry and are a gold-level project partner with Microsoft. So, no matter your organization's size, our team specializes in maximizing your business and personal productivity by leveraging the Microsoft technology experience. For those of you who join us on a weekly basis, you know that today's session is part of the series we call Webinar Wednesday. Each week, the topic is different and designed to be helpful information that will have a direct impact on your day-to-day tasks. If you have any questions during our webinar, please submit them using the questions pane in your GoToWebinar window. Today, our session is an hour in length, which means it qualifies for 1 PDU. I'll tell you more about that at the end of our time together, but it's now my pleasure to welcome today's presenters, Advisicon's founder and president, Mr. Tim Runcie, and senior advisor, Bob Bondaruk. Take it away, Tim and Bob.
Excellent. Welcome, everyone. Make sure I'm not on mute. Can you hear me? There we go. This is the Tim and Bob show today. We're going to be kind of presenting some key features about SharePoint for project management. Bob, you want to, I don't know if you've had as many exposure to the audience, but maybe tell a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. My name is Bob Bonner. First we'll leave the slide here. This is the Tim slide, where these are all the books that Tim wrote when he was busy or not busy, right? He's a prolific writer. He's written, how many books have you written, Tim?
36, 2 more in the works.
All right, that's awesome. And a little bit about me. Slide doesn't want to move forward. Is it frozen? There it goes. A little bit about me. My name is Bob Bondaruk, and I am a project manager and a technologist. I am a project advisor here at Advisicon. I've been doing project management since 1998. I've worked on Y2K projects, I've worked on construction projects, I've worked on technology projects, and I've worked on PMO implementations. And for fun, I am a hiker and a mountain climber. I really like soccer. I watch a lot of soccer, maybe 50, 60 games a year of soccer. And I'm also the past president of the Portland PMI chapter. So if you like soccer and you want to talk about that, send me an email. And if you like project management and you want to talk about that, send me an email. Okay, so today's agenda, we are going to talk a little bit about understanding SharePoint as a project management tool. We're going to talk a little bit about branding and functionality on your SharePoint sites. We're going to demo branding and functionality. And we're going to talk about metadata and lists and libraries. And then we'll have a question and answer period. Here's the project management solution spectrum. You can see way down there in the lower left side is Excel. That's the #1 project management tool in the world. Everybody's got Excel. Everybody uses it. It's really easy to make a task list, put some dates in it, and keep track of it. What's not so easy is coordinating information between different users. And you also don't get any of the formulas and standard features like earned value management and stuff that you would get in Project Standard or Project Pro. Moving up the ladder there, you get into SharePoint, which is what we're going to talk about today, in Office 365, and that gives you collaboration across your team members. So team members can add documents and share different features, and you can also share your project site and the components within your, or not your project site, but your project plan and your schedule with your team. Then you can move way up the ladder there, and you can get in Project Pro synced with SharePoint and Project Server Online. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. And as long as we're on that topic, we are actually going to be using Office 365 today for our demo, and inside of that we are using PWA, which is the project server platform for Office 365. And it's not SharePoint in itself, it's project server inside of SharePoint running as one service or 2 services. Anything you want to say about that, Tim?
Sure. You know, whether you're in 2010 or 2013, or hopefully you're not back in the 2007 or 2002 versions of SharePoint when you had the old free version of SharePoint, but a lot of what we're going to be showing today is basic out of the box. So while maybe some of the menus have changed, or the ribbon might look a little bit differently, the functional approaches are the same across multiple versions of SharePoint. And if you think about the solution spectrum, the whole idea of a project manager is to collaborate, right? We're wanting to collaborate with our team. It's not about sitting behind a desk with Microsoft Project every day. It really is about making sure information is quick, accessible, and how you present that. And so SharePoint is a huge tool. In fact, I remember when it first rolled out, it was a little ugly. There was a lot of little things that you just had to wrestle through. But the excitement around having a collaboration portal that was browser-based was significant. In fact, I used to do a lot of work with the Microsoft Access production team and a lot of Access MVPs, and they didn't get it. They just, I don't get it. And I was so excited from a project program and portfolio perspective. So today we're going to be kind of walking you through, and as Bob mentioned, we're going to demo from a current environment. But again, some of the basic functionality, the same features are there. They were embedded many, many years ago, and they still retain that functionality for SharePoint supporting PM.
Yeah, so if you're wondering what version we're using today, we're using the evergreen version of Office 365, which is always the latest and greatest that Microsoft has to put out into the community. Branding as a PM tool. So as a project manager, you have the opportunity to use branding to brand your project, to brand your product. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what does branding look like and how can you use SharePoint to use branding and to improve your project communications and do a better job delivering your project. Why care about branding? Get your audience a little bit more excited about what it is about your project. Gives your audience a view of your project that is aesthetically pleasing. Maybe gives them a reason to want to come and look at your site and read the information about it. So it's not just look and feel, though. It can also be about functionality. Within look and feel, you've got the logo, you've got color themes, you've got navigation, and you've got the layout of different pieces that are going to sit. We're going to do a demo later and show these things. Pitfalls you might want to consider with branding. My favorite pitfall here, the one in the middle, is time sucker. You can spend a lot of time worrying about color schemes and where this position is the right thing for this app, or should I move this over 3 inches. And I used to do a lot of report development in my youth, and I've spent some time moving things around on a screen just to try to fit everything in the right spot. And that's great for a report that you're going to publish and send out to thousands and thousands of people, but if it's a project site that only 3 people are going to look at for the next 2 or 3 weeks, you could spend a lot of time on those kind of components. It's really not going to deliver value.
What's kind of important there is, sorry Bob, just jumping in here, the idea of branding isn't about just frosting the cake, right? I mean, you go and you put sprinkles, you put candles on it. It actually has a lot of other elements behind the scenes in terms of clean navigation, simple and easy to find things. So don't just think of color themes and fonts as part of branding. It really is about making that site functional.
Right. Another thing you can do is a lot of time corporations have a branded theme that they want to push across the whole entire site, and you can make your site really ugly and not fit in with everything else that's going on, and that can be confusing to people when they get to your site. Why did I leave the company? Am I on a site that's not kosher? And then also you can just put way too much information on one page. It just makes it so people don't pay attention and just don't even want to come to your site.
What's funny is there's a video out there. I encourage people to hop onto YouTube. It's called the Microsoft iPod. And it actually was the internal marketing team at Microsoft basically created a commercial as if they had created the iPod themselves and how they would market it. And what it was a spoof making fun of how Microsoft brands things. And the overall theme, and I encourage you to go watch it, it's pretty hilarious, is that sometimes putting more is not more, right? You could jam way too many things in there and make it confusing, and so it is important to kind of think through some of these. And we're going to be showing you some techniques that will help you at least control what you see or how you move it or where you put things in and around your site. So as a PM, you can make the collaboration portal for yourself very functional.
So here's some web parts that you can use on sites. If there's timelines, documents, announcements, links, team contacts, issues, risks, task lists, custom lists. So these are all components of SharePoint that you can bring into a site and then use to manage information, which is then helpful for managing your project. And we'll look at those today during the demo. Where did my mouse go? Hey, what do you know? There's a demo. Let's see if I can find the demo. Here we go. So today for the demo, I am actually using the Edge browser, which is the latest and greatest browser. It has some good things about it. One of the things it doesn't do is allow you to do trusted sites. So it's probably not going to be popular in your corporation. So here we are. We have a SharePoint site. This is actually a site that's attached to a project. I've cleverly named the project Webinar-2. Yeah, so I can keep track of which one it was and move it to the top of the list because the list is sorted alphabetically. So what do we have going on here? We have a SharePoint page. We've got a couple of apps here, documents, newsfeed, project summary. This project summary is a piece that's built into the project server integration. So this is actually information that's coming through our Microsoft project schedule that's tied to this specific site. If you were just doing a plain SharePoint site that didn't have project built into it, you wouldn't necessarily get this app and this information. So what kind of things can we do from a branding perspective? Well, we've got the top nav up here. So there's a series here where it says edit links. We could actually have a whole set of links that would run all the way across the screen. We could have 5, 6, or 7 links up there that take us to different things. A lot of times you'll see on corporate websites, you'll see links to divisions like finance and HR and components like that. But within your own site, you can do links to important content that's in your area. So for instance, I might have a link to documents. Instead of having it over here on the left nav, I could have it on the top nav. Now if I want to add a link, I can just click on Edit Links and click on the plus sign there. It's going to open a little window, and I can type in whatever site I want to put in. I'll just do Google because I know it works, and I'll give it whatever name I want, special link, and click OK. And now when I click Save, I have now edited my top nav, and I've got a link here that I can click. So I could link to anything. Maybe I've got a HR page that I want to link to, or maybe I've got a finance page that I need to link to. Maybe I've got pictures of the team barbecue that I want to link to that are hosted out on some website where I post pictures, right? I can do the same thing over here with the left nav. I can click on Edit Links and click the plus sign, and then I can have another special link. Typing is not my specialty. Do not reach out to Advisicon and request me for typing. But we do have some great people that are really good at that. It's Administrative Professionals Day. Make sure you send your admin a card. So for the site, we'll do Yahoo. We'll click OK. And now I've edited the navigation on the left menu. And this navigation over here on the left menu has actually already been edited to some degree. This project link is something that we added. It is not standard out of the box. If I click that link, it'll actually take us to a list of all of our projects. And then I've added some components, so there's things that have been added in here under recent as well. So you can modify this top nav and this left nav to meet the needs of your specific site and your specific group of users. And that's really valuable for linking to information that's not necessarily in your site, but on other sites or in other areas in the company or even outside the company.
A couple of things just to add here. You notice that there's some tiles in the middle of your page, and if you think about what is there, it says getting started with your site, and of course you could take out that basically that library. We talk about list, links, and libraries, and what that really is something called promoted links. And so aesthetically, instead of you just saying, hey, here's a list of hyperlinks pointing to different sites with a name, you can actually make it a promoted link, and you can attach an image that allows people to hover over for a tile. So again, some of the presentation layer is helping people quickly find something. And remember, if you go to a site, a project collaboration portal, and it's a sea of text, then people tend to get lost. And so mixing it up with active tasks, graphical indicators. In fact, we just did a timeline discussion with Visio last week, which is on our YouTube channels, how to build timeline views. All these things you can define what is important to present to the end users, and including newsfeed, documents, and of course, the standards, issue risks, and deliverables. But again, this is your audience, and that's who you need to be considering is what do we want to say and what are we trying to help them find when we come in here.
Let's see, another piece you have up here is a logo. So you could brand your site with your own logo. Right now we've got the Advisicon. I don't know what color that is. I think it's green, but maybe it's teal or blue or something. But maybe I want to change out that logo. I can go into Settings under the cog, And under here it's got title, description, and logo. So I can actually jump in here and change the title to webinar. I can put in a description. And here I can choose a logo from SharePoint or from my computer. I'll select my computer and browse my pictures. And I will select the Advisicon logo that has a little picture of the world on it. We're slowly taking over the world. One country at a time, right, Tim?
One office at a time.
Yeah. And I clicked OK. And it's done. And now when I click on Home, which you can see it's already changed up here, and now I've got this new logo up here.
A lot of times PMOs and projects a lot of times come up with their own themes or logos or backgrounds in terms of saying, hey, listen, when you come here, we could kind of keep a theme that says this is when we're on this site. And when you leave, you visually have a different display. And I don't mean like a wild and crazy background display where you've got Mardi Gras from one site to the clean Sahara Desert to the other site. But again, the overall idea is from a functionality of aestheticness is that you can make this very quick, very simple. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. And then the other thing you can change is you can change out your theme. So you go up to the cog and you click on Site Settings, and you can get to the theme. Oops. And you can get to the theme by clicking on, where's it at? Change the look. And it brings up a series of themes. Now, a lot of times companies lock these down so you can't change them, but you can. These are the options you get. We can change out. We can have a white background with an orange color font. We can have a black background with a green font. There's a lot of different choices here. Positives for that, again, is it makes your site distinctive so people know when they're there. The negatives on that is, changing from a white font to a black font can be a little bit jarring sometimes to the user, and they might wonder why that is. Are you trying to shock me? So just consider that when you're thinking about changing the look. I am not going to change the look of our site. I'm going to leave it Advisicon colors. Using my nav up here, I go back to our main site. Down here we've got a news feed. I really like the news feed component. You can use that to basically have kind of a discussion between people. You can see here I've said there's a party, tell your friends, and then Ken's jumped in and said sounds like fun, looking forward to it. I can pop in here and add a picture. Maybe I get a picture of the party. I like to climb mountains, so I'll put a picture of me climbing a mountain here. It loads up and puts the picture in. I click post, and there it is.
Mount St. Helens, right?
Yeah, that's a volcano. That's Mount St. Helens. Don't fall over this edge. Not good for your health. And so you can jump in and you can reply, cool picture, whatever. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something fun. It could be totally a work-related thing. You could be out on a job site and take some pictures, and you could post them in here, and you could say, hey, look in the middle of that picture. Look what's going on. You have this complete communications platform here. And now everybody that comes into your site can now see this news feed, and they can react and respond to it.
Yeah, similar to a discussion board. So those of you that are using different versions of SharePoint or even previous versions, you'll find very commonly that a threaded discussion group or a discussion board really allows people to ask FAQs, having a section for that. Now, whether you decide to put that news feed or discussion board on its own page, and it's just a link on the left nav or top nav, really is a matter of what is the most important thing that you want to leverage your real estate for from a landing page perspective.
Right, so speaking of real estate, we've got a series of web parts here. So we've got project summary, newsfeed, documents, and then we've got this getting started set of tiles in the middle. And these are all web parts that we can add. And if we click on edit page, we can see that we have kind of three zones on our page. We have this top zone here, which has the summary and the getting started. We have this left zone over here that has the site feed. We have this right zone over here that has documents. If I was using IE, I would actually be able to click on these and drag them between each other. Because I'm using the Edge browser, I can't do that. If I want to move them, I have to click on an item and go up to the menu. Which menu item is it? Let's see if I click on site feed, click on web part, click on web properties, and then choose layout. I can move the zone from left to right and click OK. So yeah, much easier to do in IE, just grab it and move it over.
Yeah, think of it as just design changes, and at least at this time, until they continue to update the product, it's still very, very early in its life cycle. But yep, in terms of those of you that might be in the newer browser, we've gotten some questions in the past like, hey, wait, why can't I drag it like I used to?
Right. And let's say I want to go in and add in another web part. Maybe I want to add a calendar. So if I click on add a web part, it gives me a whole list of apps here. There's social collaboration apps, there's project web app, there's media. You're only going to have project web app if you're using project server. There's search, filters, document sets, but I've got the calendar. It's right at the top. I'm just going to click add, and it's going to put in a calendar right there on my screen. And now I can go back to my page, and I've added a calendar. So I've got my project summary, I've still got documents and newsfeed. This might not be the best layout, so this is like, again, you can spend some time figuring out, well, what's the layout, what's the screen look like, what do my typical users look like, what are they going to see. Maybe it's really important for this calendar to be really visible and everybody to see it because you've got key dates on it that you want to drive people to. So you'd maybe put that front and center versus maybe the calendar is not that important, so you'd drop it down below and put the newsfeed back up at the top. You can also go up here on the wheel and click add an app. So when you click on add an app, it gives you a list of apps that you can then add to your site. So we have document library, tasks, mailbox, Office 365 portfolio dashboard. That's a new component that Microsoft's just rolled out for project server that builds in a portfolio dashboarding capability. You've got document libraries, form libraries, wikis, links, contacts, calendars, discussion boards. I think there's, 23 different apps here that we have that you can use, but your organization may have others. The apps are kind of, in a certain sense, it's a little bit like a store, and you can go out and buy apps and have them put on your server. Lots of third parties make apps. And then you as a project manager can select those apps and put them on your site. Going back to home.
Yeah, one of the things that you're going to find certainly is you may have a lot of the features that just simply aren't activated. So whether you want to design your site, meaning your left zone, right zone, one of the things that comes with SharePoint is you've got this SharePoint Designer, which allows you to kind of go in and design the zones and how you lay out the site. SharePoint Designer also provides workflow functionality and other things. But if you don't have access to that, the template that's simply deployed allows you to put objects in the zones that you want to work with. And then as Bob said, is you can go and add an app, and they used to call these add-ins, and sometimes you hear them referred as web parts. But inherently the idea is that you can go bring that in. And so whether it is something distributed through your corporate structure or you're pulling it off the internet and getting it, it's really kind of getting to that mobile story where you're really adding apps to provide the functionality you're working with.
And there's one more place to add apps. We click on Site Features, and we go in, and it's got Manage Site Features under Site Actions here, and it will give us a list of apps that we can activate for our site. And the news feed is at the bottom, so the Site Feed app enables the use of site feeds is already active. So by clicking this active button, that app got added into my site. Because we're using a project online, we've also got this Project Web Connectivity app, which adds in issues, risks, and deliverables. So when we go back to our site, you'll see those as lists that are already built into our site because we've actually already added this content onto our site. These are just apps that get deployed.
Yeah, what's kind of cool about that, yeah, Bob, is that yes, you can make an issues and risks, basically a library or a list. But if you're using the project online or project server, is that you could say, hey, listen, I want to tie my issues and risks back and forth between my actual project schedule that's published into the browser as well as back to the SharePoint site. So it keeps some of those things in synchronized together.
Right, so it's important to know you can go in here and you can connect these apps onto your site and turn them on. Sometimes you have to connect them to get those components built into your site before you can actually add them onto the page component of your site. So when I go back to our home, see over here, so I have risks. If I click on risks, there won't be anything there, but it's a risk list and it's an issues list. These two components and deliverables as well are built into a project and they allow me to connect these lists in SharePoint back to my Microsoft project schedule, and then connect these SharePoint items to tasks and actually assign them to people and keep track of who's working on them.
What's nice about issues and risks, Bob, just kick off a new risk, just to add a new item there real quickly, is really not so much that you've got something that is connected. So whether you're just in just straight SharePoint, it's really more about the information that you want to put in here. And as you can see here, it forces you to put in a title. You can define who it's assigned to, who the owner is, set up due dates, probability of occurrence, the level of impact, and the descriptions. But oh, thanks. He's giving me all the work to do. If you scroll down, as you go through kind of filling these out, you're going to see some key fields here. And I don't know whether you've had risk management training before, but Microsoft has spent a lot of time working in the project management space. And I was really glad to see that, again, carrying these over, we talk about, mitigation plan. Scroll down a little bit further, Bob, so they can see it once you get done typing there. Is, what is your contingency, right? What's the mitigation? We have an overall high-level description of all the risks that are out there. But you can actually go and either add additional fields, but a lot of times what people will do is they just need a quick description, a quick list. What is the trigger that says this risk is going to occur? What are we going to do to prevent it or minimize the OWI? Or, what happens when it actually occurs? But you'll notice on the ribbon, it says attach file. And so again, a lot of times people will have a document library where they're putting their issues and risks, they have an issues log or a risk log. But believe it or not, sometimes instead of forcing all the information into that SharePoint object, basically that record, you can attach a whole file that has documentation backup, or maybe you have a risk register, or you've got a complex set of definitions and contingency plans. So it really does kind of combine best of both worlds. And again, you can set these up manually, leverage the same type of fields, just basically creating a library to draw from. And again, we're just using some of the out-of-the-box ones that come with Project.
Sorry, I had to clear my throat before I could talk. So I added our risk here. Lunch will be awful. I assigned it to Tim. He's got work to do. Because it's out of the box, it comes with a couple things. It's got a probability rating, and it calculates this exposure here. Bigger the number, the worse the exposure. And it's got the attachment that I added. I don't know what I added. I just grabbed a file. I'm not actually going to open it. It said something about car maintenance, though, so it's probably a car maintenance plan. So yeah, again, these are out of the box. Well, they're not out of the box in SharePoint, but they're out of the box if you're using SharePoint with Project Server. What else do we want to show? Let's show a custom list. So I created a custom list already. This is a stakeholders list. I actually stole this from one of our clients. They actually have this on their site. They produce a stakeholders list. Theirs is a little bit more extensive than this one. But what I did was I created a custom list. It's got a title, an owner, a description, and a field for key stakeholder. And so if you have information across your project that you need to collect that can be collected into a list format, it's really easy to go and create a new list and put it in there and make that information shareable across your team.
Yeah, whether it's a team contact matrix or it's, key links. Remember, list, links, and libraries, right? So when you go and say, I'm going to add announcements. Announcements is a list, right? It's a whole series of activities. Of course, they have a start and an end date. You go and say, hey, I've got a series of events. I'm adding a calendar. But guess what? The calendar, really in and on our project, is simply a list of basically activities that are displayed in a calendar format. So a lot of these custom lists or libraries that you set up, they're all and have specific characteristics about them. So sometimes people will go and say, hey, here's all the documentation that we have, and they put everything in a document library. But then maybe you have something that's an FAQ. Instead of just having a library called FAQ, some people will put a PowerPoint, and then they'll do it into basically a presentation library where you can actually see the slides and click on them without having to go and open up the actual files. So there's some great functionality that you can kind of take advantage of. And again, be thinking about your audience. Who's coming to work with you? This is your collaboration portal, and what can you do to make that streamlined?
All right, so let's say I need to create a new custom list. So I can go into Site Settings. I can actually see on my list by going to Site Libraries and Lists from inside Site Settings under Site Administration. And it gives me a list. I've got a calendar, deliverables, documents, issues, microfeed. That's the site news feed that I was doing. And there's that stakeholders list. But I could create a new one by clicking Create New Content. and it gives me a option to choose what kind of list do I want to create. And these are the ones that I've already got on my site, but maybe I want to create a new one, so I'll click on Add an App, and I'll choose Custom List. And I got to give it a name. Let's say I already used stakeholders. What did we do last time? Let's call this one the key deliverables. I have trouble spelling that. I'm going to create my list. And you can see there it is, and it's new. If I click on this ellipsis, it gives me some information about it. I can drill into it by just clicking on it. It doesn't have anything there. All it's got is a title. So as soon as I start it, all I get is a title. I can go in and modify and create the views. I actually want to go and edit the list. So I'm going to jump back over here and drill into the list, key deliverables. And so it gives me the ability to create columns. I can add existing columns from existing sites. Why would I want to create a column versus add an existing column? When I add existing columns from other sites within my SharePoint list, it gives me the ability to search across all of those fields. So for instance, I might use the owner field, which is a way to identify a person within the SharePoint, one of the users who's an owner. And if I use that, whenever I search that owner field, it'll find all the content that's been attached to that one owner. And it makes searching much more powerful. Versus if I create separate columns, they're not related. And that makes the search functionality a lot more difficult. Let's see, we already had title, so we're gonna, let me do key, and I'm gonna make that as a yes or no. And the default value is gonna be no, and I'm gonna click OK. And then I'm gonna add the owner field. So I'm gonna click from existing, I'm gonna type O. There's a lot of fields in there, so it's useful if you already know what you're looking for. That's probably doing this often creates some knowledge in your brain that'll help you find things and create more things faster, right? So now I've got a title, I've got whether or not it's key, and I've got an owner.
Quick comment here, and I think, if you begin to start understanding the context behind SharePoint, is that list links and libraries, believe it or not, these are they're basically database tables. You can put an amazing amount of records in there. In fact, up to 18 million records inside of these. And so as Bob's using these custom fields or drawing from common fields amongst the already existing basically lists and libraries, is that you can actually sort, filter, query. You can create diagrams and charts and graphs and stick them right above a library and say, hey, give me a count of how many documents have been reviewed and approved. There's just so much that you can do, and the idea is that you really are leveraging this as a database. And so this is kind of the transition where you went from kind of, hey, it's a quick portal with a browser view to, my goodness, these actually have, sorting, filtering, grouping. There's workflow behind these. So leveraging, common fields across libraries are helpful, or lists. And also is if you want to create something yourself, once you create it, then you can also share that with other libraries. So it doesn't let you have to go and recreate the same thing every time. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, so I've got my list here. I've got title, key, owner, lifecycle. Let's say that order isn't quite right. So I can click on column ordering. It'll bring up a little screen that lets me move the order around. Perhaps I want to move lifecycle up to the top and put key at the bottom. Then I click OK. Now I've moved my order. I've got title, lifecycle, owner, and key. And then here it is over here on my left nav. I can click on key deliverables. And here's my list. Now there's not much to see yet because we haven't actually added any items. So to add an item, I would click on new item. It's going to open a little screen here. Title, lunch, that's where my brain is, life cycle, that's an execution. And the owner is still Tim. And of course it's key. And so now I've got a little record here. And I can add another item. Dinner. Still in execution. Still Tim. Still key. So again, I have the ability to create any kind of list I want, any information I need to track that could be done in Excel, I could do here and in SharePoint. And the beauty of this is instead of it sitting on my computer, only accessible to me, it's now up here on the web, accessible to anybody on my team that has access to my site. Anybody who's got access can come in here and add content or edit the content or change and modify the content, which creates a lot of collaboration power, right? So there's the ability in here. So if you don't know, these three little ellipses indicates that there's a menu attached to this. So what this is saying is, do I want to modify this view or create a new view? I'm going to add one more item just to make the view interesting. Let's see, we're going to call this Develop Webinar Content. That's going to be planning. I get to own that, and that's most definitely not key, is it? So I go in here and I might want to create a new view. So I'm going to create a standard view, and we're going to call this the Lifecycle View. And it gives me all of my columns here, and I can choose not to show certain columns. I can choose to filter if I wanted to just filter by, let's say I only wanted to show items that are of life cycle execution. I would do this. I would set the life cycle field is equal to execution. Did I spell that right? I can't tell.
Mean to you.
Yeah. I don't have my reading glasses on. And we'll click OK. And so now see the lifecycle view is now filtered out that one that wasn't key. So if I click on all items, I get everything. And I've got my custom view that I just created, same data, but different view of it. It's just filtered it down to the key. Now with only 3 records, it's not particularly valuable, but with, as Tim said, we can put 18 million records in here, and that would be a lot more valuable, the ability to create different views.
Yeah, while SharePoint may limit 2,000, usually the 2,000 is kind of a threshold limit for objects or artifacts that it typically will search or display. Bob, let's take this maybe to the document library. I think that might be good to kind of talk about list links, and then really what most people use SharePoint for, especially is the content. So they're using it as a document storage retrieval system, and let's just kind of expand what we've got going here there.
Okay, so over here, when I click on documents, I've got a document library. And what you can see here is a list of documents that I've already preloaded. You can see here we've got lifecycle attached to our documents. One of the nice things about a document library is I can load that from, I can just drag and drop things into it. So I've got these 2 files on my desktop. I decided I want to put them in my document library. I just drag them over and it loads them up. And then I can close out of here. So I can work locally, I can take my laptop home and work from home, and I can connect up and put them into the SharePoint site. So the things that I'm working on that I'm really not ready to share yet, I can just work locally with them, and then when I'm ready to share them and put them all out to the team, I can put them there, or I can put them up on the SharePoint site and work on them, and then I can send a link to somebody and say, hey, edit this, and they can edit and add their comments and send it back to me when they're done. It gives me that ability to do document sharing and collaboration.
So Bob, if we're working with a document library, I mean, do we think about the 20th century where everyone was in either a filing cabinet or folders on the network shared drive? We know we obviously can drag entire folders and folder structure inside of here, and at least in terms of a migratory thought process, that people do grasp the concept of, hey, I'm using a folder, I can kind of structure and organize that. But there's limitations with what folders do, and part of this, today our goal is to help educate you a little bit more about the broader picture, give you some tactical tips, tricks, and shortcuts to help you be effective with project management. But what, as we think about from a folder perspective, what are some of the approaches or things that you've wrestled with folders, folder concepts, and then of course, do's and don'ts SharePoint?
Yeah. So we've got folders versus metadata. So as a user, folders are somewhat kind of ubiquitous, and you kind of understand them intuitively. You've got filing cabinets around your office. They've got manila folders in them full of documents. You use those to separate different documents for different things, and you kind of understand this idea of physically separating the documents with folders. When you get into SharePoint, you can do the same thing. You can see I just created a folder here called RFPs. I could then take these documents that are RFP related and move them into that folder. And that might be nice from a visual perspective because I can now say, oh, all of these documents that are inside this RFPs folder are clearly RFPs. But what you lose there is you lose that kind of piece of information. Visually you can see it, but if you actually just open the document, you can't tell that it's an RFP. But you could if you used metadata. So you could, instead of using a folder called RFPs, we could create a column called RFPs, and then we could actually check which ones of these are RFPs, and then we would know these particular pieces of documents are related to RFPs and these other ones aren't. And we would get the same capability as a folder. We could then group by RFPs, and it would put all of the documents into that one category. The tricky part, of course, with metadata is a lot of times users don't know the metadata when they load the files, and that can create some gnashing of teeth, if you will, if the metadata is required. I go to load a document, I need to come up with a bunch of required fields that I don't know, I can't get my document saved. That can make it difficult for me and make me not want to come and use SharePoint. You can get around that by using workflow to get the document loaded and then fill in the metadata later. You can come in later after the fact. You can load all the documents and then fill out all of the metadata. So like you see, we have a lifecycle column here. The documents that I loaded don't have a lifecycle, but I can just pop in and edit and load the lifecycle.
So maybe we just run through a quick scenario here. Let's say that we have 300 documents that need to get moved. This is a huge program we're managing. We definitely are going to communicate key deliverables. Here's the contacts, maybe a timeline at the top. Obviously you have information, and then of course documents around maybe the project lifecycle there, Bob. And so we want to move a whole lot of documents in here. So as Bob mentioned, again, metadata means that we're really talking about columns. The ability to treat a SharePoint library as a database that allows you to sort, filter, group that information, as well as use security to prevent people from seeing things that they shouldn't see. You're not going to get that using your folder structure. So if, Bob, we were going to drag a whole lot of files in here, what are some ways that maybe we could just quickly, instead of forcing everything to be mandatory in terms of fields, what are some things we could do maybe to speed up the process to update the metadata?
So I think you're asking me, so like right now I can go in here and I can cut quick edit. It's going to give me a grid here, which allows me to go through and quickly say, oh, well, I've got planning here and I know this other document's planning. I can just drag that down like that. Didn't work. Try it again. There we go. I could just go in here and type. Maybe I've got a whole new phase I want to put in here. Planning, execution, closeout.
So whether you make it a drop-down or a multi-value select or something, depending on what we're trying to put in here, and I'm kind of baiting Bob a little bit because we have customers that say, look, I've got a ton of documents, they're all in folders, I got to get them moved into this library. And the idea of drag and drop is beautiful. You can certainly import them in, but at some point, search, basically the search power of SharePoint is what you're wanting to maximize. So while search crawl can go from site to site to site, from library to library to library, in fact, it will search inside of the documents that you have inside of here. So if you were doing a search putting in text, you're going to find that it'll actually be able to search inside the document in the document library. So instead of having a convoluted naming schema for everything, you just say, look, I'm going to put them in here, and then I'm going to add metadata content, or basically columns of information. And if you look at what Bob just did here, so he went into what's called quick edit. And what's valuable about this is the fact that I would grab a folder, empty all the container objects into the document library, I wouldn't bring the folder over, and then I would just autofill the fields that I needed. Basically go through there and fill out, whether it's an RFP, yes, no, is it part of the life cycle. This is just really an easy way to do that. And then, guess what? Next folder. Drag them in, drop them off. All the fields are going to be emptied because they haven't been filled out. So the initial pass of moving from an on-premise folder structure to, or maybe you've got a ton of things that you've been organizing in Outlook. You know, maybe you have a like kind of a folder library structure there. Inherently is that you want to be able to maximize this. And last week we were talking about timeline views where Visio could actually be pointed to your document library. You can actually look at, you know, how many projects, you know, give me a count of how many RFP documents do we have completed, right? So people could be seeing this. And I can tell you case studies where customers in RFPs or working on presentations were working in 2 different libraries, 2 different documents, and when they went to present the information, again, I can think of a pharmaceutical example where they went to go in front of the FDA, they didn't have the correct information, and so they missed an entire cycle of being approval, which ended up being millions of dollars because they simply were working offline and organizing things in folders. So very simple to very complex, but SharePoint provides you a nice little interface to kind of work with and update that. And then Bob, were you going to kind of play with some of the views in here, or what were you going to do?
Yeah, well, first I was just going to point out that how quickly I added a new column. I just clicked on the plus sign, typed in a name, added RFPs, selected the ones that were yes, and now I can double click on get rid of my folder, right? I don't need my folder now. So the 3 ellipses buttons, again, that always references that there's a menu there. And if I go here, I get to the delete menu, and I click OK, and now I don't need my folder. And it's gone. But I still have the ability to say, yep, show me all the things that are RFPs, right? By just filtering very quickly. And of course, if I can filter it, I can build a view on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can clear the filter, everything's back. We've already got some pre-built views. So here's a group by. This is grouping by life cycle. And so this is taking all of those elements and just said, well, how many do I have in each element? I've got 1 initiation, 3 planning, 2 execute. If I wanted to create a view like that, I would click on create view. I would choose standard view. I would give it a name. I could select the columns here. And then I would scroll down here, and you would see group by under this left option over here. And it would ask me, what column do I want to group by? And I could select, in this case, we already did it, so I'm not going to do it again, but we would select life cycle, and it's going to now group in ascending order by life cycle. Or I can do it by descending. I can group by 2 different columns, so I could group by life cycle and then by modified. And it lets me specify how many groups to show on a page. I'm going to cancel that because I've already built that.
1 million groups.
Yeah, maybe not so many. And the beauty of the groups is they're just like folders, right? But I get a little bit more information. I can actually see how many things are inside of the folder. And then this is a lifecycle view that we built, which looks very much like the all documents view as a grid, right? I can go to the all documents view and I can hit in a quick edit, or I can build a view that's in this kind of Excel type edit mode as well. And what's nice about these views is you can actually use them to power data into Excel. You can have it automatically refresh. You can build reports. So if you've got an Excel report of a bunch of data from different places that you need to produce for your executives, you can just have it connect right into SharePoint and pull that data right into your report and refresh automatically for you. I'm going to stop editing. So again, I can always get at modify the current view or create a new view with these 3 little ellipses buttons, and I can just move back and forth between the different views. Over here we've got a thing called Notebook. This is a link to OneNote, and it's an interesting feature in that you can go into OneNote and you can build templates in OneNote. And OneNote works an awful lot like Word. So you can think of these as Word templates, which you can then build into your site, and you can then publish as part of your site. And I bring that up because if you have a set of content that you come up with, let's say you're in a PMO and you consistently know that you always want to have a stakeholders list on your project sites, and you always have an meeting and agenda notebook that you want to push out for your site. So you can create a site like this, and then you can go into site settings and you can actually publish this as a template. You go in and save site as a template, and then it'll become a templated site that you can then use to start all of your project sites with, and that way they all have the same content. You just click on Save Site and it asks you for a file name. It actually puts it into SharePoint as a solution that can then be selected for future project sites.
Yeah, I love doing templates. In fact, if you're using either Project Online or Project Server, you can have a pre-built Microsoft Project Schedule and a pre-built SharePoint site with preloaded, project charters and risk documents and everything set up. All you got to do is just click New, pick which template type, and it will basically spawn both simultaneously. So part of that is to design the workspace that your team will collaborate on and then save that as a template. Very straightforward.
Let's see, one more thing that I like to show here is we'll go to my stakeholders list. If I click on it and go up here to list, there's an export to Excel capability. So if I click on that, I can just export my list right to Excel. That might be useful if you need to send the list to outside parties that don't have access to your internal SharePoint environment. It's just a quick way to get all that content in there. Or maybe you need to do some more advanced functions that you have access to in Excel on the data, or you want to create some graphs. And of course, like anything, if you get to where you're consistently creating the same graph off of that data, you can then save that as an Excel file and load it back into SharePoint and have it point right to that list, and it can just be a report. It's available.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. The other part of there, and as you're leaving the library, any library, is if you click on it, and of course your ribbon enables, based upon what you select, is that your end users also can come in, and if you look at the list tab on your ribbon, it gives you the option, especially with that, is to send alerts and notifications. So you see the little alert me little button. Two things happen right there. One is people say, hey, could I get last week's meeting minutes or my documents? And don't send them the file, you'll send them a link. But once they have it, you can actually set alerts and reminders so that people can kind of manage what level of communication. Tell me when something new is added. Tell me when that specific document changes. And so you can actually structure the idea that information will keep people abreast of what's going on, send them a note, and it'll have a link right back to that library so they can see what's happening. So again, from everything being pushed out onto everyone, it becomes a pull process and people pull down what they need. Ken, I think we're at a good point. Maybe we can do some Q&A and then maybe kind of wrap up today.
That sounds great, Tim. If any of the webinar attendees have got questions, please submit them through the question pane in your GoToWebinar window. At this point, Tim, we don't have any questions in queue.
Well, we had a question from earlier this morning that came up, and somebody was asking about the project management system that Microsoft puts together, and saying, can we actually build that? And so a lot of times people do call and they say, look, we love the idea of having a Gantt chart with tasks, and I want documents and libraries and things that are linked together, and I also want to pull resources in. And as you begin to kind of pile multiple items together, one of the things that we come back and say, you know what, instead of building it all from scratch and saving custom libraries and then trying to write some sort of workflow, just go get Project Online or Project Server. That's really the engine that's designed to do that. What's nice about that is that you're going to still have some of the same capabilities that you're learning to leverage for SharePoint, but you've got this application that runs inside of there. So the 2016 release of Server that will be coming out here actually in the next few days for the on-premise environment, that Microsoft is changing how things are structured in terms of the way that SharePoint works. You're going to find, as Bob was showing us, we can go and add apps, right? We go and download an app, go and add an app. I'm adding a list link or a library. And so Project Server is no longer just kind of, hey, I install Project Server, I install SharePoint, I hook up SQL and Windows Server, and I bundle them all together. You really deploy SharePoint, and then you turn on basically the project management engine as a service inside of SharePoint. So very similar to the way that we were going through and talking about turning on the news feed. We really are in a position where you've got a very streamlined, integrated story that works together. And Bob's just showing you kind of a timeline view with, graphical link indicator documents, and each row in this view inherently is a schedule, either coming from SharePoint task list or it's coming from a Microsoft project schedule. So you've got a lot of functionality that you can just kind of keep together. And again, whether you want to allow people to edit from a web or make changes, these are some of the benefits that SharePoint helps bring to the table, certainly through either online or Office 365. But remember, from a SharePoint site, it's really about making sure that you have good content to lead people to the information they need to see. Even if your site has links that point to different pages or you have tabs, people don't know when they're leaving or going from one site to another if you threaded it or put it together very well. So that top nav at the top, the left nav on the left, the idea is that you sort of maybe jamming everything on your page. What you could do is kind of control what you people see. And again, modify the type of web parts or objects that you're showing. Bob, any final summary comments? Anything you want to cover before we wrap up today?
Yeah, just to add in here, there's a whole lot of content in SharePoint. As a project manager, it could probably be a little bit overwhelming. Keep it simple, right? Really, it's all about collaboration and sharing information with your team members. So you probably don't have to spend a lot of time focusing on all the different parts that are there. Get a couple of lists of information and maybe get a collaboration component like a news feed and just share, hey, here's what's going on the project, here's what you need to know today or this week, and keep your team members informed and moving forward, right? That's what it's all about.
Excellent. Ken, back over to you.
Thanks, Tim. I think we'll go over to the summary slides. There we go. Thanks again, Tim and Bob, for these very helpful insights. If you all are interested in having an opportunity to explore some of the Microsoft technologies that you've seen demonstrated in our sessions, such as Microsoft Project, SharePoint, Visio, or other Office 365 workloads, we would love to set you up with a free trial and a demo for you and your team. If you're interested in setting up a deeper conversation about your needs, please feel free to reach out and we can schedule that for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of our time together, today's session qualifies for 1 PDU. The only thing I need you to do to get that is fill out the short survey that will appear in your browser once I close the session. This program is for all of you. The topics we present in Webinar Wednesday are influenced by your comments and inputs. Please let us know what you think and we'll do our best to accommodate your feedback. Once I receive your survey input, you'll receive an email from me on Friday with the PDU number. Also, today's session was recorded and will be uploaded to Advisicon's YouTube channel on Friday. If you haven't already checked out our YouTube channel, I highly recommend it, as it contains recordings from our previous sessions, along with several additional tutorials and how-to videos that are very helpful. Okay, with that, I think we've covered it all. If you have any remaining questions, please feel free to reach out directly to Tim, Bob, me, or any of us here at Advisicon via our website or by picking up the phone. We're here for you and would love to answer any questions you have. On behalf of all of us at Advisicon, thank you for sharing part of your day with us. We wish you all the best.